Hey friends, Micah Berg here, CEO of Real Joy Vacations and founder of Vacation Rental University. Today I have Jim with us. Jim's our chairman of Vacation Rental University. I call him the grand old man of the industry. He's not that old, but he's been doing this for a very long time. And today we wanted to cover just a history and then our take on what the future of vacation rentals is going to look like. This is super critical right now because the industry's changed so much just in the 9-10 years I've been doing it, not to mention the, 35?
It's about 200 years I've been
200 years that he's been doing it.
Yep.
I think you have a prehistoric bug in your hair.
I do.
I mean, that's an old bug in there.
Yep.
So we're going to have some fun. We're going to cover the history per Jim's experience. He's kind of seen everything, go through some current times, and then we'll talk about the future. So why don't you start, 200 years ago and tell us what the world looked like of vacation rentals.
Yeah. Well, obviously, facetiously, 200 years, but the industry is very young. In essence, I think the people have always rented out their places around the beach, but in the sense of a professional vacation rental industry, I would say it started in the 70s, early 70s. My mentor, Bill Abbott, basically founded the coast here by accident. That's how most people got into vacation rentals, was either selling real estate or they had their own and built it from there.
So in the 70s, what locations were vacation rentals starting in back then?
Along the Northwest Florida Gulf, whatever you want to call it, the Redneck Riviera.
Yeah, Emerald Coast.
Emerald Coast. You had, Hawaii's always had their share of condominiums, and then the homes started to kick in.
Got it.
The Front Range has always been Breckenridge, Copper, those kind of areas. And then the Northeast, that's where people from New York would vacation, would go out to Nantucket or Martha's Vineyard, and there's just not a lot of hotels in those areas. And there's others like Hilton Head. But those kind of are where a lot of the maturing
started,
Gulf Shores, Alabama is another one.
Yeah.
So, and it started very bootstrap, all paper. When I started, the only computers were in reservations.
Right.
Nobody had a computer.
Did you have to calculate taxes with an abacus?
Almost. Almost. But we had tape sheets. We had hotels used to do the old-fashioned tape sheets across the walls.
No way.
Oh, yeah. Yep. We had the tape sheets. Everything was done by regular phone.
Yeah.
There may have been cell phones, but not everybody could afford them, and we couldn't just pass them out.
Sure.
And I'll never forget our first computer. It cost $3,500.
Wow.
Got it in
is this where we should bleep it out?
1990 or so, 89.
Wow.
I finally convinced Bill that we needed to get a computer for the office.
Yeah.
And we put it in, I made sure I put it outside of his door and people had to sign up to use it.
Nice.
So it drove him crazy. Okay, that people were constantly, so I could get more done. But the industry was very unprofessional, extremely fragmented. And even though there was a national organization, there still wasn't the cohesiveness. One is because our industry there is no industry.
Right.
I mean, if you think about it, there's no Cornell school of condo management.
Sure.
You have hotels and so forth, but the hotel industry never wanted to help us.
Yeah.
They wanted to squish us.
Yeah, and you guys should check out video that we have on why VRU, because you touched on it, and part of that, just a brief segue into that is, there is no Cornell. There is no standardized way to learn. And, you mentioned it's unprofessional.
Yes.
I view it as this, there's this nastiness that's inherent in our industry where people, it's my sandbox.
Right.
And I want to do it my way, and you get out of here. But then you go to the hotel world, and they'll be best friends with the hotel, competing with them neck and neck a mile down the road and sharing leads and I couldn't house this group of people, and we don't do that in our industry, which is awful.
Now, we've gotten a little bit better within markets, but it is still, you're in an industry, or I came into the industry at a time when people thought we were just timeshares.
Yeah.
Timeshare industry knew we weren't. Timeshare was very organized and professional. The hotel industry hated us, especially in areas where there was direct competition.
Sure.
Orlando's probably the biggest example of that, but there's others.
Yeah. Hawaii.
Hawaii. And we're seeing it more now in the urban areas with the hotels fighting back. But back then, nobody was helping us.
Got it.
We were small. We were all fragmented. And we didn't have a place to turn.
Right.
We had to learn it ourselves, and we learned it on the scars on our back. And the other problem was, nobody's really looking to get into the industry outside of the ones that are already in it, So we didn't have the opportunity to feed off of more professional or more organized
Right.
or more mature industries. And that's what hurt us getting started.
Yeah, and still really today.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's still that way.
Absolutely. I mean, think about it. We're now starting in the university. At the Cornell and all the hotels, that's 50, 100 years ago they've
Yeah.
been doing it, okay?
Yeah.
So we're behind the 8 ball a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. So we talked about, it started in a few areas. It started relatively small, bootstrapped. The condos were big. Developers did condos, and then people figured out, at least in Destin and some of these Martha's Vineyard, you could do this in houses. So where did we go from there? From what I understand, Bill Abbott and yourself grew to 3,500 units?
Yeah, right under 3,500. Managed a lot of associations, had a lot of real estate agents within. We had we grew it to where we had our own design studio.
Sure.
My wife actually came up with the idea of a Pizza Hut in one of the condos. Cool. First time ever a Pizza Hut was in a condo.
Nice.
And so it ended up being. We made at least our company, Abbott Resorts, very professional, as much as we could, given that our industry really had very little resources.
And it still sounds a lot like the Wild Wild West.
Yes.
I mean, you could literally, take them out to the OK Saloon and have a standoff.
Right.
If you had a disagreement with a guest or another
the
management
war
company.
Stories are so different now than they were back then, because the war stories back then is a lot of times we didn't even know what was going on because we didn't have the technology, and we'd find out from the owner who came in town and suddenly says, "Hey, you didn't even see this."
Yeah.
So it's changed, but it hasn't completely changed.
Yeah. So while we're still on history, I want to touch on a little bit about, there was an attempted roll-up a couple of times in the industry that you got to help with. I also want to talk about the taxation and kind of legal structure from back then. So start there. Let's talk about in the 90s and into the early 2000s. What did the taxation and legal structure look like and feel like? And then we'll get into that in the future, what it looks like. And then talk to me about the roll-up.
Okay. First, our industry is so fragmented that we don't have laws that are from state to state that are comparable, and I think everybody knows that in the industry,
county, right?
Even county to county. Yeah. But if you look at this, Florida, when I started, you had to be a real estate broker, you had to escrow funds, and you ran it under the Florida Real Estate Commission.
Sure.
We all went back to the Florida Real Estate Commission and said, and remember this, when we would get our money in, back then we had like 2 days or something to deposit it in escrow, but you weren't allowed to commingle funds. So let me explain.
So you'd have to have 3,000 escrow accounts? Is that
No. We could commingle the escrow money, but we couldn't commingle it with our money.
Got it.
So what happened is the money would all come in. Now remember, this is the day credit cards were 25%. It was 75% cash and checks.
Wow.
We would all get them
people
from
would pay a check in.
Oh yeah,
And
they pay
come with
right at
cash,
check-in.
And wow.
And so, but guess what else is in there? They bought maps at the front desk. They would eat at our restaurants. And so we weren't allowed to take all that money and put it in escrow. We had to take the money and within the 24 or 48 hours, separate the map money, the food and beverage, the vending income, anything separate from the escrow, and then put that in escrow. And if we were late, we violated Florida real estate law.
Nice.
When we sat down with the then Attorney General that was in charge of that, he agreed.
Yeah.
And his name was, Go on, I forget.
Well, we can look at it.
Yeah.
We'll look it up. But so you say we. Who's we? Who approached the Attorney General?
It was myself and Bill Abbott.
Okay.
And it was a gentleman named Al Williams from Priscilla Murphy Realty down in Sanibel, Captiva. And there was a couple more brokers that I can't remember their names that did it because they wanted to get into vacation rentals but saw, again, it was mostly escrow. And again, the software that was out there was not at the level to be able to even tell you. You had to physically sit there and the accountants just couldn't do it. And luckily, they agreed.
Yeah.
And so they took us out from the real estate and put us under hotel motel. So we don't have to escrow. But my point is, Florida's that way. Maryland is that way. Colorado is kind of that way. But then if you go to North Carolina is the other end of the spectrum. North Carolina, you have to have a broker at every location. You have to, if you're smart, you'll get your software approved by the North Carolina Real Estate Commission before you use it. There's a chart of accounts they want you to use, and that's fine. Everybody's but it's kept the industry where it's very hard from state to state to keep it, because it's so,
Yeah.
a hotel in one state is usually regulated very similar to a hotel in another.
Right.
Same with timeshare, not when it comes to vacation rentals.
So, that brings us to an interesting point where you look at the industry had started becoming what I call a teenager at that point, if even that.
Yep.
Maybe like a 7-year-old, right? With teenager attitude.
It's in the teenager ballpark.
Yeah, and what's neat about our industry is while it is young and small, and it's still a currently $40 billion projected industry,
yes.
right? And so even back then, you were generating a ton of money, which kind of caught the eye of some big money guys and the attempted roll up. And so it's neat that what you're talking about is it was like a different law in every city. You could have different laws for 2 cities that happen to be in the same county.
Yes.
Different taxation, all of that kind of stuff. And so then somebody comes in and says, I got an idea. I'm going to buy all these big companies and create this national brand and go public, right?
Yep.
And we don't need to name tons of names. They'll figure it out. Well, you can because it's on your bio. So, so whatever.
I'll give you some brief history because it's interesting. In 1997, a gentleman came to Bill and I and threw out the idea of a roll-up. And we listened, we talked to him, and it didn't go anywhere. I still talk to him to this day.
Yeah.
He never did it. He just decided it wasn't going to work. Within 2 months, Bill and I start saying, why don't we go public ourselves? This was the IPO craze time, 1997, 98. Tons of revenue, a unique product. We were big. And
3,500 units is,
and
that's a big deal.
We owned a full-scale resort, top 5 tennis resort. We had it going pretty good.
I could just see your reservations room with 3,500 different properties and their tape charts.
Tape sheets. Now we had our own software. We built it, so we had technology. But at the front desk, we still kept the tape sheets were around
for each building or whatever. That's neat.
So we started to go. We hired a firm and we started to create an IPO. We spent the money, get the lawyers going, but we didn't tell anybody. We kept it very internal. Well, right while we're doing that, the guys who created Resort Quest came to see us and said, would you roll up with us? And they had 11 or 12 companies already agreed. Wow. Nice. They sat down with us, but when we looked at it, we were bigger than their roll-up, okay, in the sense of volume. And so we felt very uncomfortable going with them. And this was in May. They went public May 26th of 1998. Okay. I know that because it's my anniversary. And we said, let's just back up and let's see what they do so we can see. So they went public, and then they bought, the first company they bought was Gulf Shores Plantation, Pedro Mendoki, who's like one of the fathers of our industry. Yeah. And then they came back to us, and we were not for sale. Yeah. But they had made a mistake. The roll-up had created a winter revenue stream better than summer, and they didn't have that balance per quarter because they're public now.
So they were getting hammered.
Right. So they came to us and basically made Bill and the gang a solid offer. Yeah. Okay. So we agreed. 60 days later, we were bought. Wow. I stayed on. Resort Quest ended up I became CEO. We didn't have the technology. Resort Quest starting it didn't have the technology because, again, we're in 12, 15 different markets. We have 12 to 15 different rules. Yeah. Nobody's on the same software.
And you're trying to report to the street.
And we have to report to the street. Yeah. So, and not just that, but cash flow. Right. Just basic cash flow analysis couldn't be done at the level that was necessary.
So to summarize that, there was a grand effort, but the technology wasn't there. No. The law structures and tax structures were just crazy. Right. Cash flow, as we know in this business, can be challenging at times if you're not properly balanced. Right? And then if you mix in that with some of your places have escrow laws and some don't, and all those sort of things, further complicating cash flow.
Absolutely. And let me add one more ingredient that made it more difficult. This is no knock against anybody. But the original executive team at Resort Quest was not from our industry. Oh, they were all hotel industry guys, very smart in their. But it's like having me go try to run a hotel company. I just don't think I could do it. They came in with all those problems you just said, And on top of that, they didn't have any paradigms in their head. They're used to a very professional,
Yeah.
full of technology type industry.
Sure.
And here we are,
Yeah.
the rogues of
Yeah.
the life.
The redheaded stepchild.
The redheaded
Yeah.
stepchild, and they had to run it, and they
Yeah.
had to report to the street. It just was,
Yeah.
it was
Sounds
not a
like
good
torture.
recipe.
Yeah.
No,
And
it was,
so-
it was torture.
So that more or less, I mean, Resort Quest still exists in under Wyndham
Right.
in certain form.
Right.
Not sure what it really looks like today, although they have continued to kind of try to build momentum.
Yep.
And to all, with all due respect to Resort Quest, a fantastic company.
It is.
I mean, truly, it's
It
one of
is.
my largest competitors here.
I got a lot of friends in it. There's nothing against what happened. It's just,
happened.
we
It was
all
part
have
of the-
learned from the fact that
Yeah.
back then it would have been almost heroic
Yeah.
if that had hit the home run that everybody was hoping it would.
And it's important to me because, I never want to talk trash about our competitors. So this story wasn't to say
No.
Resort Quest is awful and they're doing all this wrong, because quite honestly, it's not like properties are just jumping off their program onto mine. So, they're obviously doing a lot of things very, very well.
Yeah.
Um,
If Resort Quest was rolled up today or 5 years from now, I think you'd see a different
Yeah.
company. They're excellent in what they do. I'm no knock on them. I was CEO.
Yeah.
I can tell you. It's just that there was no way to lay the foundation
Yeah.
to roll up that many companies at one time with basically zero technology
Right.
and all of these crazy laws that were
Yeah.
all different. And then also deal with the street.
Yeah.
Because Wall Street is unforgiving.
Yeah.
And
But,
so
to
that's
their
what
credit,
made it
they were
tough.
profitable.
They were, yeah.
Massively profitable.
Oh, yeah,
And which
yeah.
is really kind of a cool thing where on the street level, you can fail while making tons of money.
Yeah, and the shareholders on average did fine.
Yeah.
I think the average shareholder was in at about $4 to $5 a share, and when we sold to Gaylord, that merger, as they called it, was worth about $7 a share.
Got it.
So the
Did
average did okay.
Yeah, that's
and
cool.
I was happy to be able to do that for my shareholders.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so let's move on to what I would consider present day, even though that was in the mid 2000s. There was what I call this sort of a slow period, almost in the evolution, where that happened. Nobody really was chomping at the bit after that to invest in technology to figure this industry out. And so we went through this period where I got to start, where you come off of that, people are kind of scared of this industry. Maybe it's not going to work at all, or maybe just not yet. And then you have the real estate collapse, right? In 2007, 2008. And so that further takes the wind out of the sails. And so let's talk about that stagnant period and how that leads into today.
Sure. The early to mid 2000s, the other problem with our industry is that we're all deal junkies.
Yeah.
We are all deal junkies. And so what you were saying is absolutely correct. Most of us, me included, took our eyes off of the vacation rental side of the company to go chase the deals of pre-construction,
real
the
estate
boom.
deals,
And,
right?
I mean, it was
Development
just,
and-
I mean, so many of us, me included, got caught with throwing up condos as quickly as we could, pre-selling them, and everybody buying them was flipping them, and there was no end users in sight, and that's what caused the bust, basically.
And there's still some of that inventory today that hasn't fully worked itself
There's
out of the
literally
system.
probably 1,000 units in Bay County alone.
Which is
Panama
interesting to
City.
me because that started, it's 2018, so that started over a decade ago.
Oh, yeah.
And we're
Yeah.
still absorbing this this condo inventory where there was no end user
That's
inside
correct.
kind of thing. And there's still really, we're growing fast, but there's still not an owner for every single condo.
No. If you download a list in any resort market of owners, because you can kind of separate them, you'll see as many banks and mortgage companies as you will owners in some cases.
Or even development associations that took them back.
It's
things
gotten
like that.
better,
Yeah.
but we're not completely out yet. And we're seeing some new construction, but that's what happened. That's why you had that lull, Micah, is that we all turned our attention to building. We really didn't care at that moment if our technology was that great, because all we wanted to do is get those suckers up and nut.
Yeah.
The minute the bust hit, we focused on something else,
Sure.
surviving.
Yeah.
And so that's why you had that lull time,
Okay.
I think. I think you had a time period when it was really the perfect storm.
Yeah.
During the boom, we all were profiting off of developing. Then we had the bust, and then we had the technology growth that allowed self-management to be super easy.
Yeah.
So that was that perfect storm for our industry.
That's neat. And so that leads us into the VRBO era.
Yes.
Right, where professionals, sorry, pardon the pun here, quasi-professionals like Jim.
I wouldn't even go quasi with me, but that's okay.
But professionals like Jim and some of his peers had either been rolled up in the resort quest and had no interest, right? Because they had gotten their check and moved on or whatever, or were focusing on other things and then got burned and were focusing on survival. And so when I looked at it, I was kind of coming into the industry at that time, where I started looking at it in 2008. And then 2009 is when I officially started Real Joy Vacations. But that was really the era of the VRBO because from what I remember, and correct me if I'm wrong, at that point it was nearly 70% of the properties in our area along the Emerald Coast were VRBO managed in some respect.
Yes.
Whether they had a manager but they did all their own bookings or whatever. But point is, of the 30,000, 40,000 units down here, most of them were trying to do it themselves.
Well, and it's two things. First, let's make VRBO, even though that is a domain name owned by HomeAway, we all in the industry use that term to talk about self-managed units.
Like the do-it-yourselfer.
Do-it-yourself. And another addition to the perfect storm wasn't just that we had taken our eyes off the ball and we had busted. There were a lot of people stuck with units. They were trying to flip.
Sure.
And they didn't want to pay the 10, 20, 30% management fees. They think they can do it themselves.
Got it.
And that's kind of where it all, and then all of a sudden you have the HomeAway coming and the other self-managed portals. It's not HomeAway's one, but there were a lot of regional ones too still. And it allowed the owner to at least believe that they, as they're not making their mortgage payments because they thought they could flip it for twice as much, they're just going to manage it themselves. And so building a high-rise condo that I leased the front desk during the 80s and 90s, I'd have 95 to 99% of the units on my rental program. He who had the front desk had the gold.
Yeah.
Nowadays, and even during that time, it was 40%.
Wow.
40%.
Because owners were pulling it off and doing it themselves.
Doing it themselves.
Or jerks like me would come in.
Or the off-site ankle biters were able to come in and offer a better deal.
Yeah.
So, and again, it was a money-driven thing.
To clarify, he calls me an ankle biter. The reality is he means that with tons of respect.
I do.
One, because he loves me. Two, because as we get in the future of the industry, what he's hinting at is we were the hints of a massive shift in the industry.
Yes.
And so another why VRU when we get there is going to be that shift is also causing some of the problems today that we need to educate around.
Absolutely.
Because it went from the Abbott, Resort Quest, the big companies out there that had the front desk and did it pretty well, to the ankle biters.
Yep.
And back in 2009, I didn't know any better. I mean, I did the best I could. I thought I was building a good business, but it took a long time to catch up to the professionalism. And so our goal here is to take what we learned from your history and layer that over and make sure that what we build at VRU and what we teach our subscribers here, who are ankle biters just like me, it's beautiful. I love it. I might actually keep that term like forever for this. But to all my lovely ankle biters out there that are co-partners with me, we're going to learn these things and develop them just specifically so this can never happen again.
Right.
So that there can't be this like fundamental shift where we're all caught unaware to the detriment of the real estate market and the owners, because that's really who suffered.
Well, and the ankle biters, and I call them that in a loving way.
Sure.
But what you've been able to figure out is the process is more important than anything else.
Yeah.
And I've always thought of your company like the New England Patriots football team. It's a plug-and-play model. Once you get your processes in place, you may really have a good employee, but if they leave, it's not going to tank the ship.
Right.
Okay, not even the owner.
Right.
Okay, it doesn't matter who it is, and that's what I always have loved about that.
Yeah.
And to be able to teach that to other ankle biters or to the big boys who are realizing they've got to make a shift. It's not just the ankle biter.
Yeah.
Everybody's got to be different than the way they did it in my day, so to speak. You have to, or you're going to fail. You cannot do it the way that we did it in those days. No way.
So, I want to wrap up the history of this.
Okay.
So, any parting thoughts on, because we're going to come back in a part 2 here, and we'll flesh out present day and then get into the future of the industry as we see it. But
Right.
anything we missed in the history?
Not really. We're a very unusual industry. Everybody's always heard my spiel that there's very few industries in the world that have two customers diametrically opposed to each other, an owner and a guest. And the owner wants you to charge the highest rates and not have any wine spill on their carpet, and the guest wants you to allow them to have 27 people in a 1-bedroom unit, and you're in the middle.
Yeah.
That's why Gumby is my little guy.
Yeah, exactly.
Because you're just twisted and turned.
Yeah.
Anything you can do to make that into a process that enhances customer service, enhances your bottom line, and doesn't allow for one person or one thing to mess up that chain.
Yep.
It's a home run.
Yeah.
It's a home run.
So I love the way you phrase that. You've got to have a strong chain system where if something goes wrong, the entirety of your business stays solid.
That's correct.
And so, wrapping up the history, we're going to do another video, so stay tuned for that on the future. But at VRU, we're going to teach you how to develop that system, that company, or that system of systems, if you will.
Yeah, it's like I don't want to make it sound like there's no human part of it. I'm saying that you got to have a chain like a conveyor belt of everything. If this, then this. If this, then, and have it all as a process.
Yeah.
So that you can then layer on the customer service
Yeah.
levels and not have your, as Jack Welch, the GE guy said, you don't need your head to administration and your butt to the customer.
Got it.
No way.
So we're going to build on Jim's history and our other instructors that come in, and we're going to take all of the bad things that they've done, quote unquote bad things, the experience,
the scars,
and we're going to package those up into 4 to 12-minute videos. Some of them may go as long as 15 or so, but we're going to try to keep them short. And each one, we're going to create this encyclopedia, if you will, of topics. And so if your business is deficient in new owner acquisition and you're trying to grow, there's going to be module and several lessons about that. If your business is deficient in rate yielding, or you're just hearing about dynamic rates and those sort of things, we're going to cover that in detail. Any part of the business, from cleaning to being a good CEO and what it means to lead your managers and those sort of things. We're going to break all of this down at thevrU.com. We're going to teach it to you. Stay tuned. Jim and I are actually, shortly after we get done with this business of teaching about the history in the future, we're going to do some more CRAP videos. And so if you've been following us on YouTube or anywhere, you know that CRAP stands for criticism, rejection, a-holes, and pressure. And, Jim, you're practically like the poster boy for that.
I'm a walking crap pile, if you're using that, yeah.
Your entire career is crap.
Yeah,
just
it really
truly.
is.
And
Yeah.
now you deal with me, and I make it 10 times worse.
Because you're full of crap.
I am,
There's
exactly,
a
and that's why I started the series.
There you go.
All right, so stay tuned. Come back and check out the future of the vacation rental industry, where we're going to expound upon exactly what we think that direction is, why we think that way, and what we're going to do to help all of you, ankle biters included,
big boys,
to be super successful. We're going to become more cohesive, and I think as a group, a unit, we can affect these changes that you've read about in the news about laws, taxation, all of this stuff that's creeping into our industry because people are starting to notice it. I think as a group here, if we say, okay, we're all educated, we all agree, and we're all on the same team, even though we're competitors, we can make a difference. And so,
no doubt about it. The bottom line is, hopefully this will be, the VRU is a way to help us really, and I don't want to say this wrong, help us create a true industry. Because I'm always the one that says I don't feel like we're an industry yet.
Right.
I think we're a bunch of people doing similar things, and we have different levels of professionalism, but I'm not sure if we've made it to industry status yet. And having a VRU that allows us to help others and grow the knowledge base, slam dunk.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Slam dunk.
So thanks for your time. Thanks for sticking with us through the history of VRU. Stay tuned. Check us out on YouTube, or better yet, check us out at thevrU.com, where you're going to get access to all of our lessons, all of our content, everything we can possibly provide for you. We'll see you there.